Here we are at Nautilus Elementary School. As you can see, it's your basic run-of-the-mill elementary school. Now, this school opened for business for the first time in September 1968. And I was in the 4th grade when we started classes. Brand new rugs, new paint, new everything. That tree was a lot smaller then. In fact, I think we planted it while it was there. The basic buildings are pretty much the way they were when built. The main changes is in the surrounding neighborhood. Up this way was the forest. Stretched all the way up to 293rd. They hadn't built a lot of houses along 293rd at the time. It used to be kind of a jeep trail through the forest that came out right about there where those dumpsters are, that went on up connected with 293rd. And with the school here, well, it was no longer necessary, so it got grown over. Trees went right up to where that fence is and beyond that fence, and some of them went to the cliff. I think the edge of the forest was right about where that little fir tree is along the fence. You see the backside, they put a fence there to keep kids from walking around back there like we did. But you see the same buildings. They painted those little shingles a little bit. They were more of an Olympic stain brown color when I remember. But that's to be expected. There'll be some repainting in 50 years. Walk around here. Little garden here. Some of these trees, they've grown up a bit. There was a water thing there that people used to access when they played basketball here after school or during the summer. That fence wasn't there, so we went and chased basketballs when they went that way. They still haven't replaced the net on this side. So you can't do a full court basketball here anymore like we did when we were younger. It used to be quite a place for that. It's a 10-acre lot about that. They built the school on. Swing set that stood for many, many years was about twice that tall. So maybe some kid got hurt and they decided to replace it with this little itty-bitty swing set. I don't even remember. That decoration's new. See that rock there? The natural forest was allowed to stay in place right around the top of that rise. And it went down this way. So it's like the boundary of it right about here. I remember when they first built this, well, I think I was in the 6th grade, this little pathway. And there was forest primeval that came up to probably right about here. And right about where that fence is over there, we just had an entrance to a trail that went up through the forest to 9th place, so that many of the kids that are up in the main part of Moraine Hills can walk to and from school. Going through about 150 yards or so of forest on their way. Maybe 200 yards. Well, yeah, maybe 100, yeah, probably 110 yards. It was a 5-acre lot. 220 yards by 110 yards, that's right. That's about how thick it was. Those big toys weren't there. But the natural forest encompassed where these trees were. They were little saplings then. There's 2 big firs. And it went right on up there, this side of this play field. And such. And there was forest where those houses are. And forest all the way between the school and Redondo. And the forest edged right about where here it came in part of the school grounds, kind of edged right there where those Porta buildings are there. Some forest was allowed to remain for many, many years. So this was like surrounded by 3 sides of forest when it first opened. And it was kind of adventurous. I think there was a bus that took the kids around to Redondo. The kids that were living in Redondo at the time rode a bus up here. I don't know if they ride a bus nowadays, but they had a bus, I think. Although some of them might have preferred to take the dirt trail down after school if the weather was good. If the weather was lousy, they rode the bus. Yeah, these 2 big Douglas firs were either hadn't sprouted yet or were a lot smaller and surrounded by alders and willows and other such trees, mostly alders. First year, this little ball field was just kind of a pile of dirt there that they left about the 67 or so, and about 3 years of alders just grew up on there till finally in the spring of 69 they decided to level off and make a play field out of it. And then down at the bottom of this rise there was trees up there. That there was a big cedar tree. I don't know if that's the same cedar tree. They cut it at about 15 or 20 feet above that basketball hoop. And why they do that? Probably because all these houses here want the view. They don't want their view blocked. They probably want these trees down. But when there was a forest there wasn't such pressure to log off the remaining trees at Nautilus Elementary. This fence here wasn't there, so kids sometimes ran down this hill. And I remember one kid, he put his hand through one of those gun slit windows, and I was inside the classroom when he did this, and I saw his hand go through really nice and bloody. But they were able to patch it together, so his hand should be fine now. At age 60, I think his hands should be healed by now. We go down through here. Classrooms at this end were for like the higher grades, like 4th, 5th, and 6th. Classrooms at the other end were for the primary grades, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And I think there was a kindergarten at the time. Nautilus was a kindergarten, the 6th grade operation. For 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, we went up the hill to Sacagawea Junior High. Yeah, this looks fairly the same. I want to show you something down this way. This little central courtyard, so to speak. These little buzz outs weren't there then. About 20, 30 years ago, they built these probably to add utilities, electrical, plumbing, or whatever. But yeah, this is, other than that, this is pretty much the same as it was in 1968 when they first built this place. Check this out. Those colored things there, well, they weren't painted, but they were there. There were some kind of gardens on top of those rises, but I guess they gave up and just decided to grow grass and let these trees get big. And this thing was a water fountain. It actually worked when it was new, but it hasn't worked in years apparently, and they tore out the plumbing, I guess because it rusted away. Not safe to drink water fountain out of there, but they left the concrete in place. See those little shrubs in that garden by the gym? Called a multi-purpose room, because educators are like other government bureaucrats. They like their jargon and they like their acronyms and they like to call things there. These little things were interesting to bounce basketballs on and such. That garden wasn't there then, it was just concrete. I guess they decided to make a garden out of it. We walk around here. Now, one of the things we did very early in our 4th grade year, I think it's still fall, was we had this casting here. had this kind of a thing. I don't think they thought of it as a wheelchair ramp. And you see these little painted decorations. Those were there originally. Now I look at it, and it looks like sea creature oriented. A little weed grew up in there. Because, you know, Nautilus is a type of sea creature. And they bring a bunch of us fourth graders out. And at the time, there was some kind of styrofoam in these that they used to cast the concrete around. And they got some free labor out of us by giving us some little tools, and we dug out the styrofoam from these and then cleaned up the mess off the ground. That's what we did it for an hour or so, cleaning these out. This paint was since then. And some of us joked that, well, gee, archaeologists from 1,000 years from now will dig this up and wonder what we were saying with this. It won't occur to them that maybe it was just art. A little tunnel by the office. Walk, don't run. There's nobody in the office as far as I can tell. It's Sunday in the summer. That's why I came here, so I can do this without disturbing anybody. That little sand lot was a sand lot, and it existed. Not all those houses were there on the other side of that street. They've been built since. That road just kind of came to an end at the township line. And the bottom end of this little sand, although it was sandy at the time, not grassy, kind of disappeared into the forest between here and Redondo. There's a remnant. This is the remnant of that forest. And those two conifers at West Hemlock and that Doug Fir, they've grown up since then in the last 50 years, because I don't remember those standing there. See those trees growing along the fence line? People who own the houses there, you know, wanted to put some kind of privacy barrier between them and the elementary school where all the kids play. But that's a remnant of the forest that grew between Marine Hills and Redondo. So look how thick that trunk is. So what happens in 50 years. Trunks get pretty fat. Cedar also grew up there. That was just a little itty bitty dinky thing when I was a kid. It wasn't until the spring of 1969 that they decided to develop this field. That's why I keep thinking of this area. In my mind, it's still like into the forest. The natural forest that grew up after the original old growth timber was logged. Well, it grew up here, and the school was dug out of that forest. It was all up there in these lots until the district bought its 10 acres to build this. It wasn't until the spring they decided to clear out this little area, knocking trees down. We would take, during our recess breaks, we'd come out here and we'd watch the bulldozers work away. And it was a rather spectacular event. Apparently there's a water main down here, and one of the bulldozers found the water main. Took them a while to fix it. So we're standing out here watching the Nautilus River flow down through this muddy field, disappearing into the forest. Fortunately, the way the land is shaped down there, it was no doubt diverted into the Redondo Canyon and dropped in the Redondo Creek without causing too much flooding problems for the people who lived in Redondo at the time. And you go here. This little concrete thing was built around a tree that was there. They left it for a while. And as you can see, the tree's no longer there. We used this as a soccer field. There was a steel soccer post on that end, another one on that end. So I still think of this as the soccer field, because that's what we used it as during my 5th and 6th grade year, once the grass was settled and everything was allowed to grow. And there was still a bit of forest left where that portable building is. They decided to make a kind of a baseball thing there, because of course, why not endanger all these nice windows with kids playing baseball? Maybe another reason why they let those trees grow up between their houses and the school building. Something to catch baseballs before they hit their windows. See, blackberries growing all over the fence. We had to go into the forest to find blackberries. Used to be a little joggle through this corner of the fence right here. Guess they built it so you can't get through there, but you could get through there. And right there was the top of a Jeep trail that went down through the forest to Redondo. It was our way, one of the ways we had of getting through down to Redondo. We would play around the forest, and during the summers we would explore that forest all over the place, eventually coming to a cliff. We'd look over the edge of the cliff and see streets and houses, and that was Redondo. This fancy neighborhood wasn't there, it was forest. You know, and some of these trees might be left over from the forest, that maple and such. That dead hemlock probably grew up since then, as did that fir, as did all these blackberries. But that's one of the ways we got down to Redondo. The other road on the other side had a trail through the forest that came out to this old Jeep trail as the other way to get to Redondo on foot. The forest that surrounded this school would have stumps in there that were huge, 5 to 10 feet in diameter. Some of them were like 20 feet tall, because that's the way they logged the old growth. It allowed us to kind of imagine the forest that once grew here. Huge old growth Doug fir trees, and huge old growth western hemlocks, and huge old growth red cedars. And we just kind of figured, without really knowing the history too much, that loggers took the trees down, these big old growth trees, and dragged the logs down to Redondo, then called Stone's Landing, and put them on booms out to sawmills. They were located in places like Tacoma, Yester's Mill in Seattle, and Bainbridge Island, places like that. There's the remnant of the Moraine Hills Redondo Forest. Well, how big that maple has gotten. Well, it's like they're trying to limit the height of it because they don't want to block uphill views. If those trees get too tall, they'll be under, school will be put under pressure to cut them down or to top them. Because that Doug and that western hemlock for sure will continue reaching for the sky if they don't chop the tops off. Now, one of the interesting things about going to Nautilus 50 years ago, we had the Apollo program. As soon as we start the school year, Apollo 7 takes off. Then on Christmas, we have Apollo 8. Then Apollo 9, Apollo 10. We're spending a lot of mornings watching big Saturn V rockets launch. I don't know, I think we watched one of those launches from here in the school. Because of course everybody's excited about a space program. Then of course in the summer we watched Neil and Buzz walk the moon. And then throughout my 5th and 6th and 7th grade years, the rest of the Apollo moonshots rose up out of the Florida, and we got to watch all that. So space was a big thing when I was a kid. And on top of that, if you look at the popular culture, there were flying saucers and spacecraft and Johnny Crest and Johnny Rocket and Joker. He built a flying saucer and flew it over Gotham City. Superman had to deal with them. Wonder Woman had to dodge flying saucers. It was all part of the culture. And of course, Bugs Bunny and Marvin the Martian had their adventures together. So here and there and on Mars. So a big part of the culture. Well, where did flying saucers get to be part of the culture? We're 4 miles from where flying saucers get to be from the culture. Here's the thing. We had a Mr. Butler as one of the teachers at this school then. And one of the activities class for Friday afternoon was to build and launch model rockets. See, at the time, these houses to the west of the school weren't there. There was this forest here, and we walked through the forest when we had model rockets. It was a nice day in the spring. We'd walk through here, there'd be a little trail. And instead of all these houses, there was a big clearing in the forest. They were mowing down all the trees because this is the view slope. That's why you don't see any big tall Doug firs in this particular part of the Marine Hills neighborhood. And at that time, we could launch toy rockets that shoot up several hundred feet and then come down in parachutes and without worrying about endangering houses because there weren't any. We didn't have to worry about the forest because it was cleared. And from this area, as you can see, if you go out here where it was cleared, you can see that if those houses weren't there and you just have a row of trees along the Redondo Cliff, that you could see Puget Sound beautifully. We could see the smelter stack from Tacoma in one direction, and we could see Three Tree Point, and straight across there is Maury Island. Now, I don't remember anybody mentioning the incident where Harold Dahl's boat had a bunch of flying saucers dump crap on his boat right there, 4 miles from where I'm standing right now. And here we are launching toy rockets within sight of that location. If the flying saucers had come back, we would have seen them. And nobody mentioned it, because if somebody mentioned it, we would have all been talking about it, because we're all interested in space. But this is 4 miles from the spot where the whole Men in Black and the flying saucers, aliens from another planet kind of got started. Now, in some of the science fiction prior to 1947, there was some mention of flying saucers as a shape that can be used to slice through an atmosphere if you don't have a need for wings and you have your propulsion by some other means. Of course, the aliens would have that all figured out. And such starships come over here, and the flying saucers would be there like their shuttlecraft to come down and visit the Earth. Wrecked themselves in New Mexico because they flew too low. Get shot up by the gunners of B-17s because they buzzed the bomber formations. How would you like to explain that to your starship captain? Oh, I got too close to a bomber formation. They shot up the starship. They shot up the flying saucer. Yeah. So you have to explain to them why they have to take the flying saucer into the shop and fix all these bullet holes in it. That's why I always thought, yeah, there is no evidence that intelligent life ever visited Earth. That's how we know they're intelligent. It's the dumb ones that come here. But that was part of the culture at the time. And we're shooting toy rockets 4 miles in view of the spot where the first flying saucers and Men in Black incidents happened. Because Men in Black met Harold Dahl in a hotel in downtown Tacoma and told him to keep his trap shut. And if you believe that, I got other stories I can tell you. So this is Nautilus Elementary. Looking pretty much the same except for this fence. And except that the surrounding forest is now surrounding houses. "50 years on."